Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. So, today, or this weekend, I got to work a gun show again. Getting paid to talk about guns and ammunition is kind of cool. And I just love it. And it's weird. I have this weird affinity for gun shows. It was one of those connections I've always had with my dad. This time, I actually got to connect with the New Mexico Shooting Sports Association, which is a big 2A advocate in New Mexico. And they actually asked me if I would speak because of my former life as someone that worked in the K-12 places, because these guys were actually looking at overturning some of the stupid laws that are in New Mexico that don't really have anything to do with the 2A, but have to do with parental rights and stuff like that. What I think is interesting, though, is seeing the new generation of kids coming up and talking to people. You see a lot of enthusiasm that I have not seen. You know, the first day I went there, I wore my AKOU shirt because, well, I'm there representing the AKOU. Thank you, Robski. I will always represent the AKOU because I'm an AK guy. And it started a lot of conversations just around the AK platform. Now, understand, being in a Western world that we are, that I'm surrounded by AR lovers. You know, in fact, the booth I was at, which is Go Rogue Ammunition, these guys are 100% on the 2A side, and that's why I represent Go Rogue. So Go Rogue is a New Mexico manufacturer of ammunition. So they make the best practice ammunition you could possibly get. I'm a big fan of their 9mm. They make 124 grain, and I'm not doing this as a paid advertisement. I'm just saying that, this is my own opinion of their ammunition. I use their 124 grain, which is a jacketed hollow point that is polymer coated. When I say jacketed, it's a polymer jacketed polymer jacketed lead cast bullet. And I've used it in my Glocks, and I've used it in my MP5, and I've used it in a high point 9mm, and I've used their 40, and now I've used their 45. And they run consistently. What I love about this ammunition is it actually prints just like my defensive ammunition. So, I digress. That's why I get to go represent Go Rogue, because I actually believe in their product. And Lance, the guy that owns Go Rogue, is actually a good friend of mine. And he likes me to go out there and talk guns and just represent the ammunition brand. But what I was really enthused about was seeing the kids come up and ask about certain types of things. You know, I spent a long time talking to a little guy and his, I want to say his uncle, and they were talking about how projectiles function. And just giving those little pieces of information just reminds me more and more of my dad. And it reminds me more and more of those people that I've found, the mentors in the 2A community, that actually talk to you, and they don't treat you like an idiot. So this kid, who had no idea how a projectile actually functioned in a gun, his uncle's walking him through the steps, and he's showing off the ammunition that I'm representing as pieces parts, because we had pieces parts that we could actually show what we do. And what I loved about this was he was explaining exactly what a bullet does when it leaves the barrel. Why is that important? Because if you don't know the basic fundamentals of what a projectile actually does when it leaves your gun, you are missing out on why and how you're using the tool. Whether you're using this to put game on the table so you have meat, or you're using this as a defensive purpose, you need to know the very basics of what happens when you squeeze the trigger and a miniature explosion happens and a projectile is expelled down the barrel of a gun. Now, most of us in the 2A understand this, and I'm speaking to the choir here. But to see the next generation, and I'm talking like beyond Generation Alpha, I'm talking like 5, 7, maybe 10-year-old kids, because this happened multiple times, where you're explaining these very basic principles, very basic physics principles of what happens when you squeeze the trigger. But to see the next generation coming in, this is something that the left does not have. This is something that, and when I say the left, I mean the radical left, the people that don't believe the 2A is a thing, they don't believe that you should own firearms, but to see the next generation coming in our sport, in our world, this shows that there's going to be growth. So while people will black pill you and say the world is ending and the government, I believe the government sucks, but that we're behind the 8 ball and we have no possible future happening because of the situation we've seen politically. We've seen what the Biden administration has done to us. And you get that little bit of downtrodden ideal, that black pill, so to speak. When you see the future, when you can see these new kids that are very enthusiastic, who have never been exposed to the 2A until they came here. I met some adults today that had never been to a gun show, but they're kind of shooters. This is where we win. Time and time again, when you can actually take a new shooter out, someone who's never done it before, and you can expose those lies that everyone tells you that a gun is a bad thing and that a semi-automatic is going to like go full automatic and kill everyone there. It's amazing. I walked out of the gun show after 3 days and I'm still alive, right? If you listen to one side of the political spectrum, that is the truth. But the simple fact is that there wasn't one person at that gun show that didn't purchase a gun from any booth that didn't have to go through an FFL. I saw several people. I witnessed this firsthand because my buddy Lance, having an FFL, because he sells guns in addition to ammunition, do FFL transfers because these other people couldn't. That tells you that despite what they tell you about the gun show loophole and about all this other bullcrap that is supposed to happen at a gun show, that we're still trying to follow the law. Whether we like it or not, we're doing it. What's even funnier, and I'm going to tell this anecdotal story because I think it's great. So we have these Colorado guys across from us, in another booth across from us. And they come to my friend, and they tell him, hey, guess what? Colorado has a new law that just went into effect today, Sunday, that says you cannot do can't do a direct transfer of a long gun. You have to wait 2 days. And my first response is the libertarian response, which was echoed through New Mexico gun FFLs. Not just Lance, but everyone I talked to about this. They're like, wait, that's great. That's a Colorado law. But we're in New Mexico. New Mexico law says that if you're 18 years old, I can transfer without a wait if you pass a background check a long gun, a shotgun, or whatever rifle that is. Okay? That's great if you're in Colorado. Federal law says I can do the same as New Mexico law. So while this may be a Colorado law, New Mexico FFLs do not have to follow Colorado law because we're not Coloradans. Okay? What does that mean? Okay? That means it shows just how stupid this waiting period is, because if you just cross the border to New Mexico, there isn't an FFL with a good heart that is going to follow Colorado law. Why? Because we're not Coloradans. Simply put, any law that any other state puts into place, and they are restrictive because they're in that state, as much as I hate it, I still have to respect state rights. So, a Colorado comes to a New Mexico FFL. He wants to buy a rifle, any rifle, any shotgun. Is a New Mexican FFL bound by law to not transfer the weapon if they pass the background check? Well, if you look at the letter of the law, no. We can absolutely transfer that weapon, despite what Coloradans think, or despite what Colorado law says. They're in New Mexico at this time, and federal law says, which supersedes state law, that you can transfer this if you follow the letter of the law. If they pass the background check, you can absolutely transfer the weapon. So this Colorado FFL comes up to my friend and other FFLs and says, this law is in effect. And it wasn't just my friend, it was an echoing through the FFLs in New Mexico at this gun show that said, we absolutely don't care. We absolutely don't care. Why? Because New Mexicans still believe in the Second Amendment. Despite what you see in Santa Fe, despite what you see in Albuquerque, despite what you see in Las Cruces, we are still very much in the Southwest. We still believe in that pioneer spirit, that if you are of age to serve in the military, you absolutely should be able to have this firearm. This is why what I've said before in another podcast about laws, gun laws, make no sense. You see time and time again people in California, you see people in demonizing people in Nevada, and demonizing people in Arizona, and demonizing any other bordering state because they transferred a weapon to them. Why? What they're showing is that their law had no net effect, period. It didn't affect crime. It didn't affect anything else. It was a feel-good measure because they thought this would have some net effect on crime. At least that's what they tell the voters. What they're actually trying to do is civilian disarmament. I'm still of the volition that if you are of age and you can be drafted, you should be able to own whatever the hell you want and have a beer. Because if we're going to send you to Afghanistan or Iraq or any other far-flung country and expect you to protect, quote-unquote, protect American citizens, and you have a fully automatic weapon because you're now in the military, you should still have that same right when you come home. Because you absolutely had that weapon when you were there. You had that tool. And that's what this has always been about. This isn't about a fully automatic weapon. This isn't about an assault weapon. This is about a tool. And despite what people will tell you, left or right, it doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter anymore, because the lines have been so blurred that we cannot count on people on the right side of the political spectrum, to back us when it comes to the 2A. If we could, you wouldn't see Brandon Herrera jump into the ring and say, I'm running because this guy will time and time again, and I'm primarying him, that's what Brandon Herrera said, because this guy will absolutely take our rights away. So, I am absolutely 100% okay with people coming to New Mexico and exercising their rights because they can, despite what our governor thinks. And our governor can start talking of all the mad press, and she has gotten a lot of ire lately because she banned the 2A in the largest, most populous county in New Mexico. You're seeing blowback from that, even in our little tiny counties like San Juan County. And I say tiny counties in population, not in area. San Juan County is huge. But you're seeing our county commissioners passing resolutions saying we are a 2A sanctuary county. I expect that at the city level. You want to know why? Because we still have control at the city and the county levels of even the most blue states, the states that tell you time and time again, you can't do this. But in those rural places where it actually matters, where we actually know our sheriff and we know our mayor and we know our representatives, and they grocery shop with us and we meet them and interact with them time and time again, these guys know how we feel. You know, yes, they have to play politics because budget's involved. When money's involved, and you have to do this because you have to get infrastructure built, or you have other projects, or you're depending upon it to keep your department running, you have to play politics. And I understand that. And that's why I've had that heartburn with the COVID stuff. Because for once, I was hoping that one of these guys would have stood up and said no. But if you think about it, they couldn't. Because the minute they said no for some of that stuff, they would absolutely have lost any ground they had gotten. Now, if it really gets bad, and stuff like what our governor in New Mexico did actually happens, this is where we need to hold those guys' feet to the fire and make them stand up. And I think that's what's happened. You know, I am very confident in my sheriff. And a lot of people would say, well, why would you be confident in this guy? You want to know why? Because every time that something like this comes down the pipe, he's actually stood up and said, no, I'm not going to enforce that. I can't enforce that. And I will not enforce that because that's illegal. Okay? The COVID stuff was that weird place where we were all afraid for a little bit. All of us were, myself included. But after 3 years of seeing what the government giving free rein will do, these guys have finally woken up. And that is hopeful. And seeing this new generation come in those gun shows, and they're actually talking about the 2A. They're actually asking questions. They're actually very enthusiastic about having their rights. And you're seeing these guys wearing shirts that are very much against the government's tyranny. And you're seeing them willingly, openly voicing their opinion about this. This is where the white pill is. This is where the hope is. And this is where we're going. And while we can sit here and think the country has fallen, and it has in a lot of ways, we have to be hopeful and know that that next generation that we ourselves raised are coming up. The left will abort their kids. The left will destroy themselves. Our kids, our progeny, are the people we train, the kids we influence, those younger people we influence. They are coming into power now. And while the boomer generation is still around, they're outnumbered or equally numbered to the millennial generation. And if we can influence that, we still have hope. And I will leave you with that. Like, share, subscribe, be great.